Hi, folks. This is Jason Van Tatenhove with Oath Keepers Media. Today I have on the line Constitutional Sheriff Brad Rogers from Elkhart County, Indiana. Thank you for coming on and talking with us today, Sheriff.
Yeah, it's glad to be with you. Anytime. It's always an honor to be on the radio to tell listeners more about what a constitutional sheriff does and what they can expect.
Absolutely. Well, first off, let's give our listeners an introduction. Please tell us a little bit about your past, what brought you to the law enforcement career path, and kind of what started you down the road of being a constitutional sheriff.
Well, I wanted to be a police officer ever since I was in the 8th grade. I recollect it's just one of those things that I wanted to help people and be in a position that could serve. And throughout my in high school, and I was a Boy Scout, and also in college, I was an athletic manager, and I was always there to serve. And so I've always just wanted to serve people. So I got into law enforcement about 1983, and I've been a police officer ever since. Now, that said, it doesn't mean that I've always necessarily had my brain wrapped around doing absolute constitutional things. In other words, I always was aware of the Bill of Rights and very much respected those, but only really until I started becoming interested in being sheriff did I realize the importance of leaders actually setting the tone for that and making sure that the leaders can be the guide for the officers on the front line. And I'll tell you, I remember in my patrol days watching the results of Ruby Ridge, watching the results of Waco and the Branch Davidian compound. And then lastly, the thing that cooked it for me was Hurricane Katrina, when the federal government came in and they started seizing firearms. And so, and I believe Oath Keepers was generated as a result of that. It's initiated, and because I think that people, military and law enforcement, were not prepared for illegal orders such as that, unconstitutional orders, and so Oath Keepers was formed, as my understanding. I'm a member of Oath Keepers and have been for quite some time now, but it's important that sheriffs and elected officials everywhere are reminded that when you raise your right hand after being elected, sometimes put your hand on the Bible and you swear or affirm to uphold the Constitution of the United States and of your state. It's important that they understand that that's a solemn oath that you've taken, a promise that you've given to the people, not to any specific person, but to the people who elected you. And it's important that we, not just sheriffs, but anybody who's in government, whether you're at the federal, state, or local level, that when they take that oath of office, we're here to protect rights. That's kind of the fundamental reason for government, is to protect the constitutional rights. That's what the Constitution is. It's our guarantee that the government will work to protect our rights. Well, of course, that's not what we're seeing in a practical side of things. But certainly there's individual pockets out there, people like myself, who take this seriously, and we want to make sure that, at least in my case as sheriff, I am protecting people from criminals in most cases, but I can also protect them from an overreaching government. Sometimes that's from the federal level, sometimes it's from a state level, and we've even had examples of local levels where I've stepped in and said, no, we're not going to do that. So
Sheriff Rogers, give us a few examples of times that you've stepped in and been that line of protection for your citizens there in the county.
Well, there was a local time when a local mayor had a dispute with about 25 residents outside of the city limits, and they were hooked into the city sewer system, and there was a dispute over contracts that had been neglected over time, mainly because of the city's fault. But nevertheless, there was probably some legitimacy that there was some money owed to the city and things like that. But the mayor arbitrarily said, because of this disagreement, that we're going to disconnect the sewers. So as sheriff, on the day of disconnect that was scheduled, I went out and parked my car on the disconnect. And I said, no, you're not going to do that without due process, without these people having the ability to take it to court, to have their side heard, and absent a court order anyways, to have one of the most fundamental processes of our living arrangements, the sewer system, being disconnected. And that was a couple years ago. That mayor has since been replaced with a new mayor, and nobody's ever had their sewers disconnected. So that's a classic example of where local officials are actually protecting citizens from elements of the local government. And I'm from the government. I work for the government, but it's important that we're there to protect people's rights. And then, of course, the most famous one it happened in 2011. I was in my first year as sheriff when the Food and Drug Administration and the Department of Justice were involved in investigating an Amish milk farmer in Elkhart County for distributing raw milk. And they were inspecting him fairly regularly, almost every couple weeks, nitpicking him parts, actually sent him a subpoena to appear before a grand jury in Michigan because of the crime, I say that in quotes, the crime that he committed, that he was distributing raw milk to food co-ops in Michigan and Illinois. And if you know what food co-ops are, and for your listeners' sake, you pay a fee to join this food co-op so that the food that you get is naturally grown, it's without chemicals and so on, and supposedly more healthy, and of course you can get raw milk from them as well. So the farmer called me up, I think it was December 1st, 2011, and he said, Sheriff, I'm having trouble with the federal government. Can you come help? And so I went, sat at his kitchen table. I think I even drank raw milk that day. And quite frankly, looked over his paperwork, and I said, well, you don't want them here, right? And he says, no, I don't want that. I've cooperated with them up to this point, but he said, I don't want to cooperate anymore. I said, fine. I fired off an email to the Department of Justice trial attorney, and I said, you don't come back here, and your FDA agents do not come back to this farm anymore unless you have a warrant based on probable cause signed by a judge. And if you do come back, the sheriff or his deputies will arrest you or remove you from the property for trespassing. So that was December 1st, 2011. I think on or about December 4th, 2011, that farmer received a certified letter from the Department of Justice releasing him from the subpoena, the grand jury, so he didn't have to appear.
Well, that's great.
And today, this is what, March of 2015, now over 4 years later, there are federal agents, including FDA inspectors, have not been back to this guy's farm yet. I remain vigilant, and we will continue to monitor the situation. But here's a classic example of local officials with some backbone that know where they stand on their authority and responsibility, that they can take and apply it and protect their citizens from an overreaching government. You see, they even threatened to arrest me. They said, well, if you interfere with these inspections, Sheriff, you can be incarcerated for up to 3 years. I said, well, I'm defending the Constitution. I wasn't worried about them coming and arresting the sitting sheriff for protecting people's rights on raw milk. You can tell that's really a terrorist and a high priority in our government today. It really should be. Being facetious, of course, but the issue is that why is the government telling us what we can drink and eat? And quite frankly, I feel like they were overreaching there. If I have to abide by the Fourth Amendment and get search warrants, then so should the federal government. And it doesn't matter what Congress has allowed or given exceptions for. I still think that the Fourth Amendment is applicable. So, in this day and age when our presidential circus is going on with the elections, you may feel somewhat helpless about who can be president and who's going to be our next president and so on and so forth. But what you need to be concerned about, I believe, is who you're electing for your local officials, county commissioners, county council, mayors, sheriffs. Those are the people that can make a difference in your local community and have an impact of an overreaching state or federal government.
Absolutely. Now, have you had, you mentioned that they threatened to arrest you. Have you had any other sort of pushback politically or otherwise for taking the stands that have taken? Has there been any other sort of pushback?
No, in fact, most farmers were very much. Elkhart County, by the way, is a county about 440 square miles. We have 200,000 people that live in Elkhart County, and it's a mix of rural and urban areas. But we have a lot of farming. We have Amish community, so it's not unusual to see horse and buggies along the road and so on. But the farming community was very thankful and impressed that I took the stand that I did. And we've had a couple of other people who have contacted me in follow up to that to maybe address some other issues. Nothing has come to that head yet, but they're out there. And of course, these FDA agents, they live locally. They know what they see it in the media. They know where the sheriff stands, and so they're very cautious about pushing the envelope and making sure that they're well within their rights to do what they're doing. So no political pushback. In fact, that was in 2011. I was reelected in 2014 with 70% of the vote, and that was even after going to the Bundy Ranch in Nevada and defending gun rights and all the different things that I believe as sheriff it was my responsibility to do.
What are your thoughts on how aware are your fellow sheriffs on a whole about what their responsibilities and even the range of their authority to protect their constituents there in the county? Do you think most sheriffs know just how incredibly powerful a tool it can be when used correctly?
Well, I think all sheriffs are kind of in different levels of understanding and different levels of learning about their job and the Constitution. But part of the problem is I think that we have leaders who have given wrong perspectives on what law enforcement is. Law enforcement oftentimes is, we're the boss and, do what we say and we're here to enforce the law regardless. The law is the law is the law. Well, I disagree. We're the servants. You're the bosses. We're the servants to the people. And yes, we do have laws to enforce, but we took an oath of office. We don't check our mind at the door. So that means that when our founding fathers put that oath of office requirement in Article 6, Section 3 of the Constitution, they didn't want everybody to check their mind at the door. They wanted people to think for themselves, to know the Constitution, which is, I keep in my back pocket all the time. It's not a difficult document to understand, and so they want people to uphold it. So if your state legislatures, for example, say, you need to start arresting people with black skin or red hair, it doesn't make sense to say, well, a law is a law. I'm gonna enforce the law regardless of what it says. No, you don't have to. We've given us discretion to uphold the law, meaning the supreme law of the land, the Constitution, and say, no, we're not going to enforce that law. And I've had editorial newspaper boards and so on accuse me of not following my oath of office because I refuse to enforce all laws. Well, they don't know what they ask. In fact, it would be really a terrible thing to think that officers could just enforce every law in the books without considering the constitutionality of it. And I realize there are some gray areas, and it's not everything is black and white, but some things are just so clearly unconstitutional that we don't have to enforce it, and we won't. And so it's why some sheriffs don't take that and run with it, I don't know. I mean, you have some are worried about being reelected. They don't want to be radical. When has it been radical? It's when you defend the Constitution. But today, that's the mentality. And so we want to make sure that we're continually educating the sheriffs, and that's what we do through the CSPOA, the Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officer Association. So CSPOA.org. Richard Mack started that. And I don't even agree with everything that Richard Mack stands for sometimes. But, the thing is, he and I agree on a lot of things, and having a constitutional sheriff, one that is not bowled over by other elements of the government, and I think is very important. Sheriffs bemoan the fact that they are losing their authority. Well, I'll tell you why they're losing their authority. They're giving it up. They are giving it up, not because I as a sheriff am special or anything. I put my britches the same way you do. But the point is, I have a responsibility that I took with that oath of office, that I uphold that, and sheriffs are giving it away. They're just acquiescing. They're letting others, like the federal government, intimidate them into doing just about anything or going along with anything. And that's part of our problem.
What do you think is the best way to reach out to current and future sheriffs to educate them about these topics you're talking about? What's the best way to get through to them?
Well, certainly through your citizens. It's tough to, if I go to another sheriff, they'll listen a little bit, but they might think they might just dismiss me as too radical, and they don't want to go there. There's also a book out that Richard Mack has put out called The County Sheriffs, America's Last Hope. And he outlines the proper role of a sheriff and the proper role of law enforcement. And, our proper role should not be out emphasizing the writing of tickets every day. I mean, there may be an element that public safety and enforcing traffic laws is good to a degree. But if that's our only emphasis, then we've lost sight of what a true peace officer or what a sheriff should really do. And so, educating them, continually breaking down some of those misconceptions, encouraging them through sheriff's associations and so on. I meet with statewide with organizations that are looking to vet sheriff's candidates. And we even have the CSPOA even has a questionnaire that you can send to your sheriff's candidate, and what they would do if the federal government was abusing someone's rights and so on. So there's things that you can do to vet, but we're not asking the right questions, it seems, most of the time. We're not holding people to their commitment, their oath, and part of it is the lack of knowledge that the people have. The people don't even know the Constitution. How do they hold their elected officials who don't know the Constitution? And we don't teach the Constitution a lot of times in schools, unless you're homeschooling or it's a private school. So those are things that is systemic to the whole issue here.
We talked about Bundy Ranch. You went out to Bundy Ranch when it was happening, along with Sheriff Denny Peyman, Sheriff Richard Mack, Sheriff Jeff Christopher. Tell us what motivated you to go out there, and tell us about your experience while you were there.
Well, I was asked to come out as a sheriff to hope to engage the Clark County Sheriff to get involved in the situation, just very much like I would have. I really don't even take sides particularly. I really don't know for sure. I don't know all the facts, and in the sense that Mr. Bundy, I mean, I certainly hear the arguments, but I don't know. I mean, seemed like a decent guy and all and whatnot, but there may be something that he needs to be held accountable for. I don't know. But my whole point in going out there was we do not need federal agents being killed, and we do not need the protesters, or some call them the patriots. We don't need patriots being killed. Over what? Cattle? If I got a court order to go round up cattle, I wouldn't need my SWAT team. And that's exactly what the federal government did, is they brought their SWAT team in, maybe because they were anticipating trouble. But you know what a good sheriff would do? If I had a court order such as that, I would go to the people and say, look, a judge has given me a court order to round up cattle. How can we resolve this peacefully today? And if they said, well, we're not going to be able to. I said, okay, well, let's try to work on negotiate, work out a plan or whatever. But instead, in typical what the federal government does, is they come in and basically govern at the point of a gun. And so that created problems that escalated quickly. I was not there for the confrontation or the gun pointing with each other, and I was there days afterwards. And I said, this is, we don't want anybody getting killed out here. I don't want federal agents hurt. They're people. We don't want patriots hurt. They're people. And individual federal agents, I don't view them as evil. It's the overreaching system, the issue, the system they're involved in. That's the real big concern. So, and I realize they take an oath as well. And we could get down to individual. They should have been accountable themselves and this and that. I get all that. But my point in going out there was to be a keeper of the peace. And let's try to resolve this thing peacefully. Let's work on the sheriff getting involved and intervening. And Mr. Bundy himself, the only reason I talked to him, because I said, if there's a problem and we need to take you into custody, will you submit to the sheriff? And he said, absolutely. I will submit myself to the sheriff of Clark County. And so that just goes to show you that he was willing to accept consequences if there were any. And I don't know what those are, but he was willing to go into custody of the sheriff because he trusted the sheriff more than he trusted the federal agents that were basically governing at the point of a gun.
And I think you had touched on it before. Our generation grew up with Waco and with Ruby Ridge and seeing these, really, as you said, the governing at the point of a gun, where it turned out not so good for the people involved. And I know, at least speaking for myself, when I saw those, very similar guns pointed at women and children there, I didn't want to see another episode like that happen on our watch. And I know that's what motivated me to go down there. Of course, I didn't bring guns. I brought cameras and microphones, but we all play our part. Now we've got, guys that are looking at 30 years to multiple life sentences with these indictments coming down. What kind of punishment do you think would, I don't know if we even want to get into this, but what are your thoughts on the indictments coming down now for the guys that went out there and tried to stop a Waco from happening? Now, granted, it is a sticky situation. There were guns involved on both ends. We did have the precedence of Waco, but is there ever a justification for going out there and trying to safeguard lives?
Well, here's the issue. I think that, the people have a right to peacefully assemble, and they have a right to bear arms. Now, what the federal government is alleging that they did, I'm not real clear on. And I don't know what these arrests are occurring. who knows? Maybe they're going to come after me next. I was there. I wasn't there for the confrontation, as they call it, which is maybe what all this is stemming from. I don't know, but I was there, and it could be that they're coming after me next. I don't know. But here's the deal: if I get arrested for protecting the Constitution, I can look my family in the eye and I say, I did my very best. I tried to uphold my oath of office, and the situation with these other gentlemen. Well, I don't know what information the government has. I can't really comment on that.
Absolutely. The Oregon standoff, you're on record as stating that you didn't necessarily agree with what was happening. Again, they had the right to peacefully protest, and as Oath Keepers National, we were okay with that as well, but we were not, necessarily okay with what happened afterwards. Granted, again, we didn't want to see loss of life over a peaceful protest, what was up to that point a very peaceful protest. Yes, there were guns there, but they weren't pointed at anyone. They weren't. It seemed to me very much like when I was there covering it, it seemed like much like an occupation of a university building, much like we've seen in the 60s, and the Attorney General was involved in an arms occupation of a university building back in the day. What are your thoughts on what happened in Oregon, and give us your insight?
Well, I certainly don't know what was going through Mr. Bundy's head and why he chose this remote cabin to set up shop in there. And, it just seems like, the timing, on the heels of President Obama's executive gun control announcements and so many things that would seem to give more fodder for the president to take more action. I'm just not sure that I say I don't agree with what happened, how it happened, in regards to how they took over that building. And on the other hand, whatever, you'd have to ask them what their motives were. I don't even know what they were going to try to accomplish. But on the other hand, you have law enforcement who sees a crime being committed, and whether it's trespassing or whatever, we're expected to take some action. But sometimes that action is just waiting them out. And time is on our side in law enforcement typically, and when nobody's dying, when there's no hostages, and it's we don't even know that no shots were fired, at least initially, and there was nothing that that anybody was imminently in danger, then time is on their side, and as peace officers, we always try to resolve things like hostage situations. We try to resolve them peacefully. Could we go in with guns ablazing and eliminate the threat? Yeah, we could do that, but I think the public expects us who are serving that we're here to try to resolve things peacefully, and so our goal would be to seal off the compound, shut the utilities off. At this time of year, the Russian winter would set in, and maybe they'd go home. And that doesn't mean that you don't necessarily hold them accountable, but they can be arrested somewhere else. But then there was a roadblock set up. I'm not even clear as to why they set the roadblock up. Yes, the people were apparently fleeing, but the initial stop to it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, when they probably could have peacefully dealt with it at a community meeting or someplace where these guys were all together. And in fact, the sheriff may have been able to get involved and resolve it at the local level. So it's those kind of things that now we have a situation where somebody's been killed. We have the FBI, who has a propensity of not telling the truth, and in situations like this, so we don't believe what they're saying. They have video that is sketchy at best as to what really transpired, and so it's these kind of things that concern people like myself, the local officials, that if I had a situation like that, I would get directly involved and make sure I do everything I can to resolve that without federal. Federal agents are going to be on the skirt of this thing, but try to resolve it without them getting involved, and it can you can keep much more control of the situation. Same thing as Waco. If the sheriff would have said, they could have said, Sheriff, do you know David Koresh? How about you? We have 20 warrants for his arrest. And the sheriff says, yeah, I see him every day as he goes to get supplies in town. He's friendly to me. We have a respect for each other. I'll arrest him without incident. And it could have been resolved. That's
Exactly.
a similar kind of thing that they could have done with this situation, that instead of somebody actually getting killed, and now we have lots of commotion as a result of that, and of course someone lost their life, then that's an issue that we don't take lightly. Again, governing at the point of a gun. But again, it's hard to hold people accountable. It's good. It's easy to hold a sheriff accountable. You know his face. You know his name. You know how to get a hold of him. How do you hold the FBI accountable? There's no face to it. There's no names. They hide all that. There's nobody accountable. In fact, oftentimes we've seen where they get promoted. So it's those kind of things that discourage the American citizens, and certainly Congress has the authority to regulate and to control that, but they've shirked their responsibility there. So those are some of the things that I see. And then I think you have a sheriff like Sheriff Palmer of Grant County, Oregon, who's trying to keep things calm, and he's trying to. It's not his county that this is happening, and yet there's people going after him because of allegations, albeit one-sided allegations, that he was tipping the people off and somehow feeding them information that would affect their escape or otherwise. So I don't know. I mean, there's lots of misinformation out there. I, of course, was intrigued and interested by some of the, I think Oath Keepers had people on the scene, and I think we got some good information out of Oath Keepers as a result of that. And again, I think Oath Keepers, we were trying to resolve that peacefully as well, and making sure that nobody got killed. So it's that should be our ultimate goal. And whether you're in law enforcement, whatever service you're in, it should be where we just don't want bloodshed. And and yet you have the liberals out there who's saying, all these domestic terrorists should be shot. Wow, who wants bloodshed? Yeah, we're seeing who wants the bloodshed, and it's not typically the people who are true constitutional sort of